I am Kelly Springer and registered dietitian with Kelly's Choice. Thanks for joining me today. And we're going to be talking about Kelly's tips for missing nutrients. And thinking of that word in particular, missing nutrients, what does it mean? So we're going to get into the details about it. So here we go. All right. So, just getting into a little bit about what Kelly's Choice is. We are a company that is founded by me. I'm actually the owner. And we do everything in the way of nutrition from worksite wellness, as we're doing here today. We also do private practice. So, if you'd like to see one of our registered dietitians, just contact us at kellyschoice.org and you can book a private practice session with one of our amazing dietitians. So, getting into our work that we're going to do today, we're going to talk about the standard American diet. Its acronym is SAD, SAD. Isn't that sad? So sad. So the reason why I love that its acronym is SAD is because the standard American diet is kind of sad. It's full of refined carbohydrates, which means simple carbohydrates. So foods that can actually have your sugar levels go spiking up and shooting down. Not so great. Also, it has a lot of processed food in there too, which can be high in sodium and lacking in nutrients. So, just recently, I was asked to write an article on scurvy. And probably no one on this presentation has ever heard of scurvy. And the reason why is because scurvy is a lack of vitamin C for over a 3-month period of time. Now, we used to see this way back in the days of the pirates and explorers, okay? And today, it's coming back into play. And that is because we are not getting the foods that we need to get in our diets. We are missing nutrients. And that's why the standard American diet is so sad. All right, so these are the different nutrients that are even more prevalent than our vitamin C that we just were talking about. So when we're talking about potassium, fiber, calcium, vitamin D, and iron, we're going to go through each one of these and the foods that you can get through these nutrients and how you get them in your daily diet. But basically, like I was talking about with the standard American diet, is that these refined foods are missing these nutrients. So let's get right into it. Let's get into potassium. When I say the word potassium, almost everyone goes to bananas. That's what they think about right away. So it's truly, it does come from bananas, but it's a nutrient that we literally cannot live without. Potassium is an electrolyte also. So if you're thinking about in the way of recovering from a workout or trying to get more hydration into your body, potassium can help with that. It also helps to regulate your heart. So, pretty important, right? So, it's recommended that we get the 4,700 milligrams a day, but currently only 56% of Americans are actually reaching this goal, which is really, really high. So let's talk about the foods to get in potassium. So, like I said, bananas, they always stick out, but you can also get potassium from avocados and potatoes. You also get it from spinach and green beans and fish, and also foods like tomatoes. So, potassium is in a plethora of different foods, and it's also in dairy. Okay, so you can get potassium from tons of different ways. But again, as Kelly's Choice is always promoting, we go back to real food. If you see the foods on this screen, these are foods with one ingredient. These are real foods. And you're going to see this trend as we go through this presentation. All right, so on to the next, fiber. So anyone that knows me knows that fiber is one of my favorite words in the whole dictionary because fiber is so important to everything that happens in our body. So what we know about fiber today is that our gut bacteria, so let's think about this. Our gut bacteria live in our digestive tract. So there's about 30 feet of digestive tract inside of us. So think about that, 30 feet. And there's over 100 trillion bacterial cells that live there. So these little teeny bacteria. And the one thing that they need to survive is fiber-rich sources. So in looking at this picture here and seeing Brussels sprouts and apples and our strawberries and spinach and bananas, these foods all contain fiber-rich sources. our whole grains, our fruits, and our vegetables. So these are the foods we need to help keep these gut bacteria alive. Now, why is that so important? These gut bacteria are actually responsible for a host of different things, like your metabolism, which I think everyone would be a little concerned about their metabolism, helping with weight loss and keeping your weight stable. They're also responsible for making vitamins. Yes, actually making vitamins like B12 and K2 and folate and biotin. These are essential for our body's health. They're also responsible for about 90% of the serotonin that is made in our brains. So that's actually responsible for keeping us healthy and happy. So these fiber-rich sources, as we were talking about, are so impactful in our lives. So we want to make sure that we're getting these in. So let's break down what the difference is between a refined carbohydrate and getting into what is a whole grain. So I'm going to blow up this page a little bit so you can see it even more. Oh, it won't let me do it. I can't. But we can see right here that, sorry, that we just went away. Where'd it go, Ashley?
I don't know.
I don't know either. That was very interesting, but we'll
Yeah.
get it back. No problem. Hang on a second. Okay, so let's bring it back to our fiber page here. Okay, and now we can blow it up. Here we go. So we're going to show it in this way so you can see this a little bit clearer. So when we're talking about anatomy of a whole grain, we're talking about when we see on a label, it says 100% or the word whole. What this means and why it's so important is because a whole grain is going to have three different parts: the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. Three parts. So the bran and the germ are where you're going to find the fiber-rich sources and the B vitamins, and the endosperm is basically just the sugar part. Now, why this is important and why I blew it up and why I want to show you this is because when you have refined grains, the bran right here and the germ right here are removed. They're taken out. So all the fiber and all the B vitamins are completely stripped off, and you're just left with the sugar part. So going back to what I said in the very beginning about the American diet of getting in refined grains, of having that sugar go, your blood sugar going straight up and shooting down, this is what I mean. If we're not getting whole grains, then we're going to be having refined grains. These are not great for our diet. Okay, so we'll shrink it back down. So this is why we need to make sure when we're looking at our breads, for instance, that we're making sure it says the word whole or 100%. That means you're getting all three parts, not just the sugar part. So it's recommended that we're getting about 25 to 38 grams of fiber a day. Now, to make it really easy for you, what we recommend at Kelly's Choice is getting about 5 to 7 grams of fiber per meal. Now, the average American gets somewhere between 5 and 10 grams of fiber per day, and that's not enough. It does not feed the gut bacteria enough. It does not keep us healthy. So trying to get in those fiber-rich sources from whole grains, from fruits, and from vegetables evenly throughout the day. It's going to help stabilize blood sugar levels. It's going to help fight your risk of diabetes, heart disease, weight gain. The list goes on and on. So really, truly making sure you have about 5 to 7 grams of fiber per meal. Okay, so moving into our next slide here, we're going to talk about calcium. And I'm going to actually blow this up so you can see it a little bit clearer. There we go. So now we're into calcium. And as you can see here, a lot of us know that calcium comes from dairy-rich foods, but it also comes from green leafy vegetables, and it can come from beans and nuts as well. So if you don't consume dairy, you can get it from other sources too. Now, it's interesting that calcium is also an electrolyte, just like we talked about in the way of our potassium. So we need to make sure that we have our calcium-rich sources to help with multiple things, especially if you know our bones. So this can really, truly help keep us healthy. But a lot of people are not getting enough calcium into their diet. So let's just see how we could actually get this in. So we can get it from dairy sources, and we can get it from lots of different places, like I talked about in the way of our nuts, in our spinach and things like that as well. Okay, so on to vitamin D. If you have been looking at any TV sources recently, you're going to see that vitamin D has actually been correlated to reducing your risk of COVID. Crazy. Because vitamin D works in our immune system. And going back to our gut bacteria, those gut bacteria are also responsible for about 70% of our immunity, 70%. And it works in correlation with vitamin D. Now, vitamin D works on multiple different levels. So it also works with the bone. So we just talked about calcium rich sources before this. Calcium and vitamin D work together to help get into the bone. So if you don't have vitamin D, you might not have a good bone density because the calcium can't get in. Okay, so they kind of work in this really cool symbiotic relationship. So vitamin D comes as the number one source comes from the sun. But we're living in central New York where we haven't really seen sun in a while. And during the winter months, we can't get the rays that we need to truly transform the sun to the vitamin D that we need in our bodies. So this is where we need to make sure we're getting vitamin D from food sources. Eggs are a fantastic source, same with mushrooms, or getting it in the way of supplementation. Now, again, at Cali says we are real food first, but in the winter months, I even take vitamin D. So we want to make sure that we're taking the vitamin D sources to do everything in the body from our bone health to our immunity. All right, so getting into how much do you need? Now, vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. So taking too much vitamin D can actually become toxic in your body. So this is one of those vitamins that you're going to want to get your blood work done prior to taking a supplement. So make sure you ask your physician about getting a vitamin D level done. And you can work with one of Kelly Troy's registered dietitians to determine what those levels look like and with your physician. A lot of times in central New York, we find that people are very deficient in vitamin D, meaning that they're going to have a prescription for vitamin D. What that looks like, it's 50,000 international units, and that's usually once a week over like a 6-week period. And that's to get your levels up. Now, if you have in a lower range of vitamin D, but you're not that deficient, they're going to probably put you on somewhere between 2,000 milligrams to about 10,000 milligrams per day. And then if you're in the normal range, you can take somewhere between 500 to 1,000 international units per day. So it just depends on where your levels are, and keeping track of that is very, very important to understand. Now, you can get some home test kits for this as well. We work with Thorne. They have it right on their website where you can go. Actually, you can go to kellyschoice.org and you can actually get one of these vitamin D test kits as well. So it's really, really important to know your numbers, to know where you are. Okay. In the summer months, if you go outside and expose your skin without sunscreen on for 10 minutes, you're going to get the whole amount of vitamin D that you need for the day. But sunscreen is going to block that absorption. So just make sure that you go out without sunscreen added. Okay. All right. Now, talking about iron. Now, iron, for the most part, is found from our meats, but we can also get it from our nuts and our Brussels sprouts and different sources. Iron is one of those missing keys. Okay. And it's really important to make sure that we're getting iron rich sources because these help us to stay healthy and they work on so many different levels of the body. So making sure we're getting about 18 milligrams daily and about 8 milligrams for men. So it's a little bit more for women, especially when they're in between the ages of like 13 and 40. Okay, so just making sure that they're getting more. And we want to make sure if you are going vegan or vegetarian, to make sure you know where your iron levels are. You can actually have an iron deficiency if you're not keeping track of that. So again, this would be a test that you would get done by your physician, and you can work with your dietitian to actually incorporate those iron levels into your body. Now, a little fun fact for you is that calcium that we just talked about and iron, if they're eaten at the same time, can actually bind. And this is going to be not good because you're going to actually have iron binding to calcium and going out of the body. So you might have a low iron level with calcium present. So, for instance, if you're going to take an iron supplement, you want to make sure you're taking it away from any calcium sources. So, we always recommend taking it like at night. And if you also take it with a little bit of vitamin C, like a handful of strawberries or a little bit of orange juice, it's actually going to help the uptake of that iron. So tomorrow we're doing a cooking demonstration and we're pairing our spinach with some strawberries because the spinach has the iron with the strawberries. It's going to help that uptake of the iron. So it's pretty neat when we pair different foods together of how we can actually help our bodies to stay healthy in that way. So again, it goes back to all of these real foods, making sure that we're getting a variety of foods that have these types of sources, from iron to vitamin C to potassium to calcium to vitamin D, making sure that we're trying to get in these different sources to make sure we're staying healthy. So, like for instance, for potassium, we could get a baked potato, a medium-sized banana, a cup of cooked spinach, or some beets. These all are going to give us potassium sources. In the way of fiber, you can get some black beans. Beans are one of the highest sources in fiber that you can possibly have. Also, like a pear, raspberries, lots of different way to get in fiber-rich sources. In the way of calcium, getting in some collard greens, some Swiss cheese, some non-fat milk. So that would be great. Also, in the way of vitamin D, making sure you get some tuna, some fortified milk, or some fortified orange juice. So, in the way of fortification, it's going to say right on the bottle, fortified with vitamin D. In the way of iron, we can get some yam, some edamame, some sirloin, also some broccoli. So these are all different ways to get in our nutrients. So we want you to stay away from the sad diet and into the happy diet, making sure that you are incorporating real foods and getting a variety of foods throughout the day. So I hope that you enjoyed this lesson and learned something today from it. So have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll be with you again next week.